I'm joined by Chris, a returning traveler from the US who came back to Japan for a special birthday trip with his wife and friends. On his first trip, he saw a lot of places and really enjoyed Japan. But something was missing. He told me that while they visited many sites, they only had a handful of real interactions with local people. So for this trip, he wanted something different. A trip that felt more immersive, more connected, and more meaningful. In this episode, we talk about how his second trip became one of his most memorable travel experiences, what changed in the planning process, and the kinds of moments that made the biggest impact. I really appreciated how openly he shared the difference between his first and second trips. If you've already been to Japan and are thinking about a future trip, or if you are planning a special milestone journey, I think you'll find this really helpful. Let's get into it! So this was your second trip to Japan. What made you want to come back?
Oh, we loved the first trip so much. It was my first time ever in Asia on the first trip. And we kind of tagged on to our friend's trip. It was a last minute idea to go on that first trip and just fell in love with the country, with the food and with the people. When I was planning this trip, trying to figure out where I wanted to go, it was an easy pick. Japan was at the top of the list.
Okay, so you liked Japan on your first trip and you wanted to visit here again. But it was also a special trip for you, right?
It was, yeah. So I'm turning 40 this year, and we were planning a big trip. I'm trying to decide where I wanted to go, anywhere in the world, and pick Japan after a lot of thought about it. But yeah, it was celebrating my 40th birthday.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear how the travel experience itself went. But before starting to plan your trip, like how are you feeling about planning this trip before we actually started working together?
Yeah, I love to plan trips and we love to travel. Ever since we got married, we always plan probably most years one big trip in a year. And I've planned them all on my own and I love it. But approaching this trip, I saw what we did on the first trip and wanted to go a bit further. And I knew that kind of what I wanted to do, I wasn't going to be able to plan it myself. I wasn't going to be able to have the experiences that I wanted to have if it was just me sitting here in the United States trying to plan it out. I could do what we did the first time and see a lot of great things, but I wouldn't get to experience as much as we ended up getting to experience on this trip.
Yes, one of the comments I actually remember really clearly on the first call we had is that when I asked you about your first trip to Japan, like you said, we've seen a lot, but we didn't feel as part of the culture. Or like you said something like, we didn't really experience things. Like, was it that kind of like the feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. We went to a lot of places. We saw a lot of the big sites. We even saw some smaller sites. But I can count maybe on one hand the number of times we had an interaction with a local person, more than just like ordering food or buying something at a store. It was a rare occurrence for us to have any real interactions with anyone while we were there. My friends' relatives were living there at the time, so we had them kind of showing us around some of the areas, which was great, but everything was through an American living in Japan's viewpoint, right? Like, it was better, it was more than I knew and more than my friends knew, but we weren't talking to someone that lived there and grew up there, right? They had only been in the country a year or two, so we didn't really have that great interaction the first trip.
Right, so that was your first trip. And you had a second trip. How was it?
Oh, it was phenomenal. I loved every minute of it. I think we accomplished the goal of diving deeper. We went to some areas that were a repeat from the first trip, some cities, and then we experienced whole new areas as well on this trip.
Right, right. So I'd love to hear more about this. But before that, how was it like planning your trip this time compared to the first time? If you could tell a little bit about that, yes.
Sure. So I did not have as much time personally to plan this trip by myself, busier at work than I was when we took our first trip. So, on one hand, it was very great to have help in that respect because I didn't have the time to do all the legwork and research this time around. But also, there was a peace of mind knowing that there was someone on the inside giving real local knowledge on things to do.
Okay. Just to give a bit of the background to the audience. So you were traveling with your friends, right? So like it was not only you and your wife, but also some other people in the group, right?
Yes, yeah, and that's another big reason why I was interested in going through the trip planning process. Because this was my birthday trip, my friends were saying, "We'll do what you want to do." I've traveled with my friends before, and usually it's a lot more collaborative where we're all contributing on what we want to do. And on this trip, they really wanted to do what I wanted to do, which was great. I loved it, but it also kind of put some pressure on. Like, I needed to make all the decisions. So I needed to potentially plan for logistics for an unknown number of people. And that was intimidating for me with my one trip of experience in Japan to figure out that logistics for potentially a large group of people. It only ended up being four of us at the end of the day, but still, it was nice to have that peace of mind.
Okay, great. I can tell that you are the great planner and like through the working with you. But was there anything from the planning process or resources that you found particularly helpful as you prepared for the trip?
Yes. So I think that trying to figure out some of the logistics of making it from one place to another and what could work in that time frame to where we weren't spending the entire trip on a train, but we were also able to move at the pace we wanted to move at. I thought that was really helpful. Like during the planning process, you and I went back and forth a good bit with questions on, hey, does this make sense? And even in our first meeting, you threw out a bunch of ideas that I had never thought of that ended up being the kind of the framework for how the trip worked out. Some of my favorite parts of the trip you suggested as ideas,
Yeah,
and I had never heard of them before.
okay, wonderful, wonderful. So the overall framework and a list of destinations that you may not have found on your own, and yeah, on the logistics side, I'm really happy to hear that. And one of the things I remember from our first call is that you mentioned you love some sort of like independence and the flexibility on the planning side. So did it meet your need?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked that because that was something I was really nervous about going into it. And I weighed that a lot because I didn't want to give up the independence and just have someone tell me do this and this and I just follow the prescribed plan. I know some people love that. They just want to show up on a trip and have someone tell them what to do. But I wanted to have some say in it. And so I was nervous about that. And I was talking with my wife when we were trying to decide about this, and thankfully she convinced me. Let's go for it. Let's do it because it wasn't at all what I was concerned about. I think you did a good job of tailoring it to what I wanted to get out of it, right? I bet if I would have wanted you to tell me everything to do, you could have done that. But you gave me ideas and gave me, bullet points, rough brushstrokes, and then I got to fill in between that with extra details.
Wow, so good to hear. Like your wife is amazing. So I'm so glad
Yeah.
to hear that too. She was on board. So yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful. In terms of the resources, anything that stays with you still that might have been helpful for your trip?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of great resources. I went through the full 12 weeks, and then when we were at the last minute planning some things, you kept pointing me back, hey, that's in such and such a lesson, which was great because then I got to go back and refresh myself. But I think some of the modules that were most helpful for me, the transportation information about train tickets and using the app was really good. It helped at the very beginning, some of the like narrowing down some specific destinations. You had a an add-on resource about onsen towns, which I found really informative. And then there's some parts of it that I wish I could have made better use out of. Some of the modules about language, like learning the language or key phrases. I think maybe that's a goal for me in the future is to do a little more and learn a little bit more to be able to communicate at the smallest basis level.
Wonderful, wonderful. Really glad to hear like you found these resources helpful. So I'd love to hear all about what you've experienced in Japan on this trip, especially compared to your first visit. What felt different when you were here this time?
Yeah, starting out, I felt more comfortable from the beginning because I knew a little bit more of what to expect. I knew how the train stations worked. They're still confusing, they're still busy, but they're not that scary, right? Like it just takes you get into the flow when you're there. But I feel like I had a more of a comfort knowing that there was a great plan in place and we just had to follow those bullet points that we had, go to this town on this day and here's what we're doing. And then we could just fill it in with whatever else we felt like while we were wandering around.
Okay, amazing. So, in terms of the experiences, is there any particular experience that stood out for you?
There's a couple. I think my top experience was the day that we went to the festival. I really, really enjoyed just being in the middle of the town's big celebration. I'm from New Orleans where we have Mardi Gras. And I think during that day, we had a lot of conversations with, in my mind, there were things that were like parallel to experiences at Mardi Gras, as you can see by my shirt. But it was both similar and wildly different from our experiences here with our festivals. But some of what I really loved was just being with the people and just being in the middle of it, especially with my second favorite experience, which was doing the kintsugi workshop. Um, the Yokoi family, yeah, they were tremendous hosts. I loved hearing about the lacquer work and then learning about kintsugi and then doing the kintsugi. But even better than all of that was just being kind of welcomed by the family and shown a lot of hospitality.
Yes, yes. So it was, very local, like place, and we were invited in their house, and we were even able to get a chance to see how they are living in real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just being randomly brought into the living room and shown the Buddhist altar and then hearing the stories of the previous generations and how they had made pieces of the altar and seeing they were living their life. They were setting out food for dinner on the table. We were just there in the middle of this normal day, this normal life, right? And it was great because it was so similar, right, to what we would do at home in a different country across the world, a very different culture, and yet very, very similar. And it was really cool to see those parallels and differences.
Yeah, yeah. Any other experiences you enjoyed on your trip?
Sure, we got to go to a Japanese baseball game in Tokyo, which was really fun. You helped us get connected with a tour guide there to show us around and bring us to the game. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed our time in kind of the slow part of the trip where we did a little bit of hiking and enjoyed a onsen town in the mountains, and I really enjoyed that part, slowing down and just relaxing a little bit.
Amazing, amazing. So you did join, like a few tours on that trip, right? So how did the guided tour experience feel for you?
Great. I really enjoy that. We've started to, in our travels, have a little bit more interaction with local guides. I think it really adds so much more dimension to the trip, to understanding where you're at. There's some places you could go and experience without a local guide, right? If you're going to go to the top of a tall tower and look around, you could probably do that without having somebody explain it. You're looking at the scenery. But especially when you're going to areas with a lot of history or a lot of cultural context, it's great to have that guide that can help you understand it better, especially when you can't read the language, right? Or really speak the language. When we were with you, we were able to talk to people. I mean, you helped translate because unfortunately I haven't learned Japanese yet, but you were able to help translate, and we were able to ask questions, and they could ask us questions, and we could have a great conversation, whether it was someone at a restaurant or one of the artists that we were working with. It just added so much dimension to the trip.
Wonderful, wonderful. So looking back, your trip, like how do you describe it as a whole?
Oh, that's a good question. I I loved it. I mean, it's probably one of my most favorite trips that I've taken. I felt like it was the most immersive that we've ever traveled. The most interaction that when we were with you or with Miko in Tokyo, we interacted a lot with people. But I found that even beyond that, I found ourselves interacting more with people than we did prior, which I think you helped us feel a little more comfortable doing it. And we were already in the rhythm of talking to people. And so we had a lot more fun interaction. So at the end of it, I felt really fulfilled. I felt like we saw a lot, we did a lot, we relaxed a lot, and we experienced a lot. So it was just full. The trip was full and did exactly what I wanted it to do.
Great summary. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. So you think it was like the most immersive trip you've ever done in the world?
I think so. I think so. Especially internationally. It's hard to compare an international trip to a trip here in the U.S. because, yeah, just because it's new cultures when we're going somewhere else. But yeah, I would say it's definitely the most immersive international trip we've taken.
Wow, wow, so happy for you. So, yeah. So, you think joining the guided tour helped? Or, like, do you think because you've done good preparation and planning before your trip, so that gave you the confidence?
I think both were critical to the trip being as successful as it was. I think it would have been a great trip just with the planning. It would have been a great trip just with the tour guide component. But I think the two together combined really well, especially since we worked with you on the planning and you on most of the guided tours. I feel like that really worked together well. And I like that we did more than one day because we were kind of able to, continue conversations we started on the first day and build on it. And it was just fun.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Yeah. So I have been talking to, like travelers coming to Japan, and some of them are experienced travelers. They have visited Japan already, and they are planning the next trip, the future trip to Japan, like for the second time or third time. Or some of them are, the planning a milestone trip to Japan, like a special birthday, like yourself. What would you say to these people if they want to make their trip more meaningful and memorable?
I can't think of a better way to do it than to work with you or someone like you to work with a local guide. I was nervous going in, so I can understand if someone else is nervous or, second guessing going in. It's absolutely worth it. I think that, especially if you find the right guide, if you work with Miyuki, that you will be able to have the trip you want, right? And don't feel bad about saying what you want. Well, as I'm talking, it helped this click in my brain. I think that the process of talking to you about the trip helped me understand what I really wanted the trip to be. I don't think I'd realized that till just now. That, going into it, I knew I liked Japan. I knew I wanted to enjoy Japan. I wanted to experience new areas of Japan. But I don't think I really knew in my mind what I wanted that to look like until we were talking and going through the planning process.
Wonderful. That's good. Kind of like, yeah, perspective. So really good to know. I know you've traveled to Europe. I know you've done a lot of international travel. Like, do you usually work with someone like myself, or do you work with travel agencies, or do you?
I've never worked with a travel agency, and I usually it's just me or my group of friends planning the trip. Recently, some of our more recent trips, we've worked with a local guide for maybe a day walking tour, but not really for advanced planning or anything like that. We would say, hey, we want to go to the this museum, or we want to see this historical site, and we would hire a guide that would take us to that area and explain everything to us. Those tours were maybe an hour to a half a day. Guides, but nothing as extensive as what we did on this trip.
Okay. You know, like my tours are usually like a day tour. Like, was it like how did it felt? Do you think it was kind of like good length, or do you think it was like like compared to because you've done short tours, right? Before.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Even on this trip, we did a sake tour that was just a 2 hour tour, and I enjoy that a lot, right? But that's like a very specific, you're in and you're out, you do that one thing. What I liked about the day tour, the full day tour that we did with you, the two that we did with you and the one we did in Tokyo, is you're having conversations throughout the day. That interaction is probably my favorite part, aside from seeing all the great things, right? But like just talking, and it really makes the whole tour more memorable, I think.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually one of the, the goals, like how I design my tools so that it's not really only about the, like doing something together, but the conversations and interactions we have through the process. I think that's something you may not realize that before actually joining the tour. So I think that is a
Yep.
great value. So I'm really glad you enjoyed that. Yes.
This isn't intentional, right? But some of the unforeseen little things of the tour were probably my favorite. Where we forgot to get cash and we had to go find an ATM, and you helped get us coordinate that and get a ride to go to the ATM on the festival day. Like that is such a great story now looking back of like what we had to do. And if we were just going to one site and seeing one thing, we wouldn't have had that. As goofy as it is, right? Like those little flexible moments are special.
Yeah. If you tell one story to your friends from your trip, what would you tell them?
Oh, I mean, I think it would be that story I was just talking about with the ATM was probably near the top of the list. I think later that day when we ended up watching the floats by night from the apartment building, like that was top story, I think, from my travels. Just so much fun, so many little interactions with people, and then seeing the floats, right? Like it was just really special.
If you don't mind, could you tell us
Sure.
the story, like what happened with seeing the float from the apartment?
Yeah. So I don't remember his name.
Aki?
Aki, that's right. So we were at Aki's house for his workshop, for the lacquer and kintsugi workshop, and he invited us. He was going back into town to watch the night parade of the floats, and he invited us to come with him to his friend's building to watch the floats. The apartment building was located right where they made one of the turns with the floats. It was very dramatic, and you could kind of get a bird's eye view up above the crowd looking down on the floats. So we went back into town with Aki, and we were hanging out on the rooftop watching the crowd get ready for the parade, watching the sun go down, just feeling the vibes of the town. And then the parade happened, and his friends were inviting us down onto other floors to come see different angles of all the floats. And it was great seeing like their excitement about all of this, and sitting next to some folks and them being just very excited about every time they lifted the float and made the turn. And it just felt like we were part of the town, part of the whole experience. We weren't Americans out of place in a foreign country. We were just visiting a place and being welcomed in like we were part of the town.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. It was a long day, but it was it?
It was, yeah, yeah. And I think there were probably several times where we're like, okay, is now the appropriate time to leave, or is now, and I it was kind of funny, right? Because we'd be like, all right, I think we're gonna leave. Oh no, come down here and see this. Of which I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, I didn't want to overstay our welcome, right? But yeah, it was great to just have that warm reception
Yeah, yeah.
from them.
And I think Aki will be very happy that now that you also mentioned lacquer alongside the kintsugi, not the kintsugi, but the lacquer is a very important part of kintsugi. So I think he's artist, so he's really happy to hear that, I think.
Yeah, and I going into this, I had no idea really what lacquer was. In my mind, it was equivalent to polyurethane or any other type of like sealant that we would use. I didn't understand, what it was, that it came from a tree, how it was used, how precious it was. Like that was eye-opening for me. And then it was great after talking to him to go see in the restored Hanmaru Palace and see the lacquer work that he was talking about just 2 days later. That was really cool.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Any last comment or suggestions you'd like to give to our amazing audience?
I would say I've been in the shoes of your fellow listeners, right? I started out listening to your podcast, and I think that if you're on the fence, if you're trying to decide, if this is worth it, or you want to take a tour with Miyuki, or have Miyuki help plan your trip, definitely go for it. Dive in. It's absolutely worth it. You will not regret it.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to have you. I really enjoyed talking to you and hear all about your
Yeah,
experience.
same here. I wish I could talk more about this trip because it was great. I could talk for days.
Amazing. Thank you.